Imagine floating in the vastness of space, a tiny speck against the swirling, magnificent backdrop of Jupiter. For the 10,000 souls living and working on Jupiter Station, this was their reality. This marvel of human engineering was a beacon of our ambition to reach the stars. But just last week, this beacon of hope became the epicenter of a potential catastrophe on an unimaginable scale. So what exactly happened? Initial reports are still being pieced together, but sources within the Interplanetary Alliance suggest a terrifying possibility. The research station was allegedly conducting a top-secret experiment to open portals, not to other places, but to entirely different realities. The question isn't just what went wrong, but what might have come through. We'll be following this story as it develops. Scientists on Jupiter Station pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible. They open a portal, a shimmering gateway to who knows where. But at that exact moment, the sun unleashes its fury, a massive coronal mass ejection, a cosmic tidal wave hurtling across the solar system. There was no time to react, no time to shut it down. The wave of energy slammed into the station, frying circuits and plunging everything into darkness. Everything, that is, except for Laboratory 13. The surge of power, instead of destroying the portal equipment, supercharged it, locking the gateway open. Now, a permanent two-way door exists between our reality and something else. What came through? And more importantly, what's still coming? The story of Jupiter Station is just beginning. The day the portal stabilized was the day everything changed. At first, it was just a shimmer, a ripple in the air. But then, the two-way traffic began. Things started pouring into our reality, things that defied description. Horrific flying creatures with leathery wings blotted out the sun. Scary, crawling things with too many legs scuttled across the floors. But the bipedal creatures, they were the scariest of all, their intelligence gleaming in their alien eyes. The scientists, the ones who had opened this gateway to hell, began to flee the lab. Most of them scrambled out, their faces pale with terror, before someone slammed the heavy blast door shut and locked it from the outside. What they didn't realize in their haste is that they had left several of their colleagues trapped inside. We saw them through the reinforced window, banging on the door, their faces contorted in panic, pleading to be let out. But no one dared open it. And then, the creatures, having gotten their bearings, began to turn and slowly approach the trapped scientists. Some tried to run, a desperate, futile scramble for an escape that wasn't there. The winged horrors were too fast, swooping down and pinning them. They started at the feet, a slow, methodical consumption, working their way up. The sounds of pure agony echoed through the halls. Meanwhile, another group of scientists stood completely paralyzed by fear, their eyes glued to the window, refusing to turn around. They couldn't bear to see the approaching dread. A few of the bipedal creatures crept closer, slow and cautious, sniffing their next meal. Before we knew it, the rest were being devoured, one agonizing chomp at a time. The few who managed to escape sealed the door, locking their colleagues in that laboratory of hell. They got to the bridge, their voices shaking as they recounted the absolute nightmare that had been unleashed. The commander ordered immediate quarantine protocols. Several non-invasive measures were put into place before we even considered opening Pandora's box. One of the grimmer ideas was to evacuate all oxygen from the nightmare lab. The theory was simple, but brutal. We make them suffocate, they fall unconscious, and then we crank up the gravity to crushing levels. The result? A very unwelcoming, soupy mess on the floor. It was either that, or the little portal of nightmares had the option to retreat back into its own realm of bad ideas. While the XO monitored the lab, the commander started receiving sit-reps from across the station. We needed to know the full extent of the damage, the injuries, the deaths, and how many of our crew had become a midday snack for these things. The situation was dire. The XO reached Lab 13 and peered through the observation window. Inside, it was chaos. Strange creatures scuttled everywhere. Some were gnawing on expensive electronics, sparks flying from their mouths. Others were, well, let's just say they were interacting with the lab equipment in ways that defied description. The XO calmly keyed the coms to the bridge. The order was simple. Begin evacuating the air from the lab. They started slowly, a subtle change the creatures wouldn't notice until their lungs started to burn and their vision swam. Once they passed out from asphyxiation, the next phase would begin. Increase the localized gravity. Crush them into a single uniform pool of organic goo. After that, it was just a matter of flushing the whole mess out into the cold vacuum of space. That was the plan, anyway. But it left one very big, very fiery question. What in the galaxy were they going to do about the literal portal to hell that was still shimmering in the middle of the room? Nobody had a clue. One step at a time, the bridge began evacuating the air from the lab. The XO watched intently, hoping the creatures would scurry back into the portal of hell they came from. As the oxygen levels dropped, a few of the creatures fainted, collapsing to the floor. But the others just kept wandering around aimlessly, like they were lost in a new world. One or two even stumbled back through the portal, but it wasn't enough. The bridge radioed the XO. The lab was a complete vacuum. Still, some of the creatures were walking around completely unaffected. The XO was baffled. What would it take to get rid of these things? He had to either send them back or knock them out. With a heavy sigh, he gave the next order. Start raising the gravity level. Let's see how they handle that. The bridge began raising the gravity level, and suddenly, the creatures that slinked around the lab just popped, like someone smashing a jelly donut. The XO smirked. Well, that was easy. A couple of flying ones, flapping frantically, finally lost their fight with the insane gravity. They crashed to the deck plating, and then they popped too. Now, only a couple of bipedal creatures were left, standing there as if nothing was happening. Continue to raise the gravity, the XO ordered. The pressure climbed, now nearing the crush depth of a gas giant. Metal groaned, and lab equipment began to implode, but these things, they didn't even flinch. The XO leaned back against the door, his mind racing. Just then, the commander's voice crackled over the coms, asking for a status report. The XO replied, "Some went back to hell, some popped like overfilled balloons, but we still have 4 bipedal creatures that don't seem to notice." The commander stared at the tactical map, a grim look on his face. "I have an idea," he said, his voice low and steady. "We blow the lab, send everything into space. Our fighters will intercept them and send them back to whatever hell they crawled out of." The XO, his second in command, considered this for a moment. "The fighters will need to go slow, sir. Almost thruster speed. We'll need some crazy pilots willing to pull that off." The commander's lips curled into a slight smile. "We have them. The wild cards." The XO nodded in agreement. A scientist standing nearby looked horrified. "Sir, does everything with the military have to involve blowing things up?" The XO turned to him, his eyes cold. "Well, Poindexter, do you have a better idea? How about you go in there and try to reason with those things?" The scientist immediately shut his mouth and looked down. The XO scanned the room. "Yes, I thought so. Now we need to clean up your mess. You know, it always goes the same way. The scientists play God, messing with things far beyond their comprehension. Then, when it all inevitably blows up in their faces, who do they call? You, the military. And what's our solution? We blow things up. But the moment we suggest it, they clutch their pearls, horrified that our first instinct is to use force." Just then, the commander's voice crackled back over the coms, directed at the XO. His mic was still hot. The XO paused, a slight smile on his face. "Oh, sorry, sir," he said, before turning to the bridge. "You heard him. below the lab. Let's get these things out of here before they find their own way out. As he finished the order, the XO glanced at the window, and his blood ran cold. A bipedal creature was staring right back at him, drool dripping from its jaw. He stumbled back, startled, as the scientists behind him screamed and scrambled to the far wall. Then the bipedal creature started banging its head on the glass, its eyes locked on them. The XO scoffed. "Oh no, I'm not going to be the midday snack for you or your friends in there." He grabbed his comm unit, calling the bridge with a grim order. Below the lab. Within 3 seconds, klaxons blared and red lights flashed through the corridor. The comms officer's voice echoed, "Depressurizing Lab 13. All staff and crew, stand by." A hatch inside the lab, fixed to the exterior wall, hissed open. This caught the attention of the creatures. They turned, peering into the dark opening. Just then, the outer hatch blew, sucking everything out into the cold vacuum of space. The XO rushed to the lab window. He looked out into the void. Everything was gone, everything except for the shimmering, unmovable portal to hell. The jig system was bolted securely to the deck plating. The XO's voice crackled over the comms, ordering all exterior hatches sealed and the fighters launched. Just as the massive doors slammed shut, a hiss filled the air as atmosphere flooded back into the lab. A moment later, the XO was back on the line, his voice grim. "Bio cleanup on aisle 13. The commander's urgent question came through. Was everything blown out? The XO confirmed it. "Good," the commander replied. "Fighters are away and hunting." Right on cue, the biohazard crew arrived, flanked by Marines in heavy protective suits. The XO waved them in, giving them clearance to enter the lab. "Clean it up," he ordered. "Marines, you're on guard. Shoot anything that comes out of that portal." Then his gaze fell on the terrified scientists. "And you," he said, pointing at the shimmering anomaly, "figure out how to shut that thing down." While the scientists frantically tried to figure out how to shut down the portal, the XO decided to tune into the fighter pilot's channel. He needed to know what was happening out there. What he heard sent a chill down his spine. The pilots were screaming about bipedal creatures, somehow still moving in the vacuum of space. Then, one pilot yelled in a panic. One of the creatures had latched onto his cockpit canopy. He was trying everything, high-speed turns, barrel rolls, but the thing wouldn't let go. Just as hope seemed lost, another pilot came up with a wild idea. He told his wingmen to redline the engines and then slam on the forward thrusters. Basically, hit the brakes at max speed. The desperate pilot did it, and it worked. The creature was flung off into the void, and another pilot immediately vaporized it with a laser blast. What a close call. The last of the bipedal creatures was finally torn to shreds, a grim confirmation that the immediate threat was neutralized. A voice crackled over the comms, the commander giving them the all-clear to land. The XO silenced the channel, his attention snapping back to the terrified group of scientists huddled in the corner. He took a deep breath, his patience worn thin. "Well?" he barked, his voice echoing in the tense silence. "Do any of you know how to shut this thing off?" One scientist, braver than the rest, stepped forward, his voice trembling slightly. "We believe so, sir. But we'll have to go inside to do it." The XO's gaze was hard as he nodded. "Then suit up, now." As they scrambled away, he stared into the contaminated lab, watching the cleanup crews deal with the shimmering dimensional goo. His frustration grew with every passing second. Finally, the scientists returned, fully encased in their protective gear, ready to face the source of the chaos. One of them cautiously asked if the XO was going in. The XO just rolled his eyes and scoffed. "Nope. Over my many years in the service, I've been taken to too many strange places. I was doing this kind of stuff when you were still pooping in your diapers and suckling on your mama." The scientists just looked at each other, stunned. One of them finally piped up, How old are you?" The XO stepped forward, getting right in his face. "Not so old that I couldn't whip you in the gym," he growled. "Now get in there and shut that thing off." They practically stumbled over each other, scrambling for the lab door. As they finally entered and approached the portal, they could see a strange purplish environment just beyond the threshold. The scientists immediately went to work, frantically trying to figure out how to shut this bizarre gateway down. In the chaos of the lab, no one noticed it at first. Then, a massive, slick tentacle shot out from the shimmering portal. Before the XO could even shout a warning, it wrapped around one of the scientists, yanking him off his feet. The crew watched in horror as the tentacle slammed the poor man against the steel deck plating, then hoisted him up to smash against the ceiling, over and over. Finally, a station marine, reacting on pure instinct, drew his battle axe. With a powerful swing, he severed the appendage. The scientist dropped to the floor in a heap. The XO grabbed the intercom, his voice booming through the station. "Shut that portal down, now, before something else comes through." Spurred by the terrifying scene, the remaining team worked frantically. The injured scientist staggered to his feet, disoriented. It felt like an eternity, but after several tense minutes, the portal finally collapsed, leaving only a deafening silence. "XO, report to the bridge. We've successfully shut it down." A wave of relief washed over the crew. The commander congratulated everyone on a job well done. Then came the order that silenced the celebration. Destroy it. Wait! The lead scientist's desperate plea crackled over the comms. "Commander, please don't. We need to study it. We found it on Io, but there's so much we don't know." The tension on the bridge was thick enough to cut with a knife. The commander weighed the fate of this cosmic mystery against the safety of his crew. For now, but there will be strict protocols. The scientist quickly agreed, and the comms went silent. "Sir, why did we ever bring that thing here?" The lead scientist looked at the XO and said plainly, "Would you rather have this thing here on this station, isolated? Or would you prefer it on Earth, where this could have happened there?" "I'd rather have it isolated here on Jupiter Station." The XO nodded his head, then said, "I still don't like that thing. Just make sure you don't start it up and open the gates of hell. If you do, once I get to you, you'll be praying one of those creatures grabs you and pulls you in." The scientists nodded in agreement. The XO then walked away, heading down the corridor. One of the younger scientists called out, asking where he was going. He replied without turning back, "Back to the bridge, where I need to be." The science team just stood there, watching him go, completely unsure of what to do next. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for the next part of the story. Phantom Static, where the phantoms speak through the static.